Well, I'm a politician, and NATO is a political as well as a military headquarters, and therefore your mind starts to whirl, first of all with the shock, secondly with sympathy, and thirdly with what we were going to do about it. And the ambassadors met just after the event, expressing sympathy to the Americans, but also expecting an initiative to come. In the background, Edgar Buckley, who was the Assistant Secretary General for Defence Planning, was already working on a draft statement to do with Article 5. John Day was the Director of the Private Office, also was preparing for what might be done if this was an attack on the United States from outside. And the work was being done at that stage, but it was the following morning, really, when we got into our stride, and Edgar Buckley came forward with a draft proposal for Article 5. I spoke to Colin Powell, the American Secretary of State, on the phone, and I said, he was, I think, in Lima in Peru at the time, and I said, you know, what about Article 5? And he said, what about Article 5? And I said, well, it's the attack on one is an attack on all. And he said, George, I know what Article 5 is, but why are you raising it? And I said, well, you've been attacked. And he said, there's a thought. He said, I'll need to come back to you on that. So that got things moving in America. Welcome to this extraordinary meeting. 9/11 had a big impact on NATO, not just in terms of the event itself, which was bad and bad enough, but it woke people up to the fact that the world had changed, and changed out of all recognition. If the Cold War had a final ending point, it was on the 11th of September 2001, because people realized that the enemy wasn't an ideological bloc on the other side of Europe, but it was these random acts of terrorists and the whole series of asymmetric threats, we call them, that had come into vogue. So there was a shock effect, and it wasn't just of shock of the moment. It was shock that led to some serious changes in the organization of NATO, both internally in the management structure and the way we did business, but also in terms of the posture against potential threats. So we built a new membership because we brought in 7 countries. We had new alliances with Russia, with Ukraine, with the European Union. We were designing new capabilities to deal with chemical, biological, and radiological warfare, as well as terrorism. So NATO was transformed. We didn't waste the crisis. We used it as a platform. And one of the areas, you know, which I'm proudest of, and I think was one of the most significant, was the fact that the confrontation with Russia was completely and finally over. We had a common enemy that brought us together, and we needed and we wanted to build on that to make the world a safer place.